Good evening and thank you for joining us. My name is Ronah Nahabwe with Winnie Buyinza Nakauchi on the sign language interpretation. First, let's look at what made the headlines.
In business today, big lies and transactions revealed as Byarugaba and Finance Director. Phones are confiscated to track the money trail. Aviation spokesperson confirms limiting operational desks to curb corruption at Entebbe Airport. Poverty, vulnerability evoke reaction from stakeholders. North and Eastern Uganda inspired empathy.
For our first story tonight, investigations into the mismanagement of the National Social Security Fund have gone criminal as the former MD, Richard Byarugaba, and the Finance Director's funds were confiscated for forensic analysis to track the 1.8 billion shillings. These are CSR's initiatives.
The NSSF investigations have today taken on a fully criminal approach as accountability for the 1.8 billion shillings intended for the fund's corporate social responsibility couldn't be provided. While being probed, the former MD and Director Finance initially denied being part of the meeting that approved this money. According to DSTV, he was approached by the former MD Richard Byarugaba to allocate 800 million shillings, part of the CSR money for Notu and Koftu. For the remaining 1 billion, no explanation for the breakdown could be attached.
And I'm going to state this once again. The MD came to me two issues. One was about the unions. And the other one was the unions, the 800 million. The other one was about the board. I do not have anywhere in the budget or the related documents a breakdown of that 1 billion shillings.
So he gave you a directive as your boss to put in 1 billion and he didn't tell you what it was going to be?
He said, and I said he said he was getting a lot of pressure from above, and I'm repeating that.
On the other hand, the former MD Richard Byarugaba provided the committee with a WhatsApp message trail of Mr. Mwanje's accountability of the 1 billion shillings that pointed to having been given to the board members, including the Minister of Gender. Mwanje, however, refuted this.
Byarugaba has talked about having a slide, and I see he's getting it on his phone. How did you get that slide on your phone?
It's from the Director of Finance.
He sent it to you through an email, through a message?
Through a message.
And can you prove that to this committee?
Yeah. It's here.
Share with the chairperson. Director Finance, don't delete any chat, please.
CID, can you kindly retrieve that phone?
Don't.
It's at this point that the committee chairperson, Winnie Mpaka, resolved that the funds of the former MD and Director of Finance be taken by CID for forensic analysis to establish the truth.
Was this a screenshot from your laptop?
I don't know, I'm not able to tell if it's from my laptop.
Did you send this screenshot?
I do not have a recollection of ever sending that.
You don't remember ever sending it?
Yes, I don't have a recollection. Mr. Chairman,
I don't want you to people to think you're giving me a secret.
And Mr. Chairman, these are generated by my team. If it was done, I don't generate screenshots. I mean, slides.
So your team generated it?
If it, no, what I'm saying, even if it was there, I asked my team if they generated this, and they said they don't remember generating.
Where did you take the screenshot from?
That's what I'm saying, Mr. Chairman. I have no recollection, and really.
I'm going to hand over both of your mobile phones to the CID. They'll be taken for forensics, and we're going to determine who exactly sent this, and whoever is determined to have sent this will be the person who came up with that budget.
The committee also discovered that management was feeding lies about the exact figure given to trade unions NOTU and COFTU as reflected from bank statements, indicating that since 2018, NSSF has been cashing out savers' money to these unions.
To my recollection, they said since it started to date, NOTU has received 451 million. COF2 has received 370 million. Those are the figures you gave us. Now, Mr. Chairman, I have now evidence from the bank records of COF2 and NOTU that from 2018 to date, NOTU has received 461,525,000. That figure is above what you gave us by over 10 million.
However, acting MD Mr. Ayota informed MPs that he has no financial records of the fund to determine what was given to these trade unions. Earlier on, the committee met a former board member, Mr. Bahimuka Julius, who resigned on the 24th of February last year and claimed to have been promised 312 million shillings. Julius informed legislators that he painfully gave out his position on demand to meet gender equality on the board membership, but still wasn't paid in full.
The deadline for the 60 days was in March. So for a training, there is you people who is resigning, we're in Nairobi. So it is hard to tell. In fact, sometimes I need to congratulate myself. This I want to state it clear, honorable members. Nobody can voluntarily resign from NSSF.
Samlanifa, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
Report can end up in court.
Away from NSSF, Uganda Civil Aviation Authority, which operates the Entebbe International Airport, is on the move to curtail reforms of corruption, extortion, bribery, and as such, multiple operation desks have been limited. Vianney Luja, the Civil Aviation Authority spokesperson, spoke to Smart 24 TV and highlighted more on this.
Following a series of attacks on corruption, extortion and bribery at the national airport, where videos of passengers complaining about excessive bribes and illegal payments to airport workers circulated on social media, the Civil Aviation Authority spokesperson Vianney Luja has shed light on the interventions. Currently, operational desks have been limited in number.
Through the harmonization, we have reduced on the number of desks that a passenger was going through. There was multiple desks even before you enter the check-in area. For instance, we had a labor desk, we had another one for yellow fever, and another one for port health, checking whether you have a full COVID-19 vaccination or a PCR test certificate. So these, we are saying some of these roles can be performed by fewer people and more efficiently.
Luja notes that limited interaction between travelers and staff that will result from less operational desks is bound to check the vice. Still, there will be no more haggling for yellow fever certificate clearance, as the respective airlines will handle such at the time of verifying documents.
So some of these roles have been handed over to the document verification desk that is manned by handling agents, NAS and DAS. And other roles like those previously performed by the labor desk will be performed by immigration officers. So we are having fewer checks that a passenger goes through than what we previously had.
Appearing before the Parliament of Uganda earlier on, the Minister of Works and Transport, General Katumba Wamala, noted that a joint security meeting held on January 17, 2023 resolved that airport operations must be coordinated with numerous stakeholders for effective operations as opposed to the past, which gave room for each entity to extort money from the naive, among other vices.
As a result, a joint security meeting was held on the 19th of January 2023 to analyze the situation and the following were discussed. 1. Harmonization of operations for the different stakeholders, especially at departures, because this is where the vice was highly promoted. This will provide an organized and synchronized facilitation process for travelers by reducing duplication of roles, multiple checks or desks before a passenger accesses the check-in counters.
Responding to the notice on the ban on photography, Luja had this to say.
Flaws in the placement of the signposts. The people who put it on departures thought that the passenger should see it before they enter the restricted area. But unfortunately, that was misunderstood by the public, and that is why we removed it from where it was on departure, because then it created the wrong impression.
The current developments seek a holistic check to remedy the aviation repetition, with similar efforts having had the implicated staff suspended. Bedson Mumbere, Smart 24 TV, Business.
Let's now look at the reactions from the poverty report. Now, just yesterday, the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development released the poverty status report for 2021 that highlighted the country's vulnerability to poverty. Now, several stakeholders have appealed to government to strongly scrutinize its programs if the country is to carve out this challenge.
The Poverty Status Report, a comprehensive understanding of the country's poverty index for the previous year, was released yesterday, detailing Uganda's ailing financial, employment, health and education status across the various regions, with the north and the eastern Uganda the most affected.
What we need now to focus on is how we can deliver the programs that have proved to be effective, how we can...
Not sending all that money, it has to pass them from level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. We should be direct, we should have a direct connection from up to down, and we avoid those middlemen.
The impression in the report comes at a time when Parliament is into the budget preparation for the next financial year, a definite moment to define key areas of priority and revert previous shortfalls, highlighted with unproductive employment and high poverty risks in the job market.
Trend of the poverty levels at the moment in the country. That is calling for our attention. It's a loud cry that this is where you need to focus. That it's also a signal that what you're doing is either working or not working. It's great that it's a positive trend. So we just now need to focus on what it is telling us, where the poverty levels are still much more concentrated, and see that they are addressed.
According to the observers, more scrutiny of the report is still crucial, as there still lies a gap between on-ground precedents and documented facts, where government investment hasn't effectively been realized in the most prone areas.
As where government has intervened, for instance, the North, NUSAF 1, NUSAF 2. Poverty is increasing. Why? Programs effective, because the objective of NUSAF was to address poverty in the North.
Honorable Msasizi Henry, the State Minister for General Duties at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, while unveiling the report, asserted that the current development program, such as the parish development model, will help spur economic transformation. This, however, contradicts with the rollout program status that has attracted criticism.
So the impact parish model is going to bring, it is going to bring every Ugandan into money economy. And this is going to turn us around in the shortest time, to be optimistic.
With 8 million Ugandans stuck in poverty and 16 million held up in poverty insecurity, the fight against poverty shall be a long-term overhaul. Fred Makuya, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
In order to deal with Kampala's projected unsustainable growth reflected from infrastructure inefficiency, stakeholders suggest that public and private operations need to join hands and address the sustainability. With only 105 billion shillings allocated to sustainable housing and infrastructure for the financial year 2023-2024, there is still call for support.
While urbanization is a prerequisite for Uganda's target for achieving upper middle income status by 2040, under the national goals it comes with challenges. Issues like congestion, climate change, waste and pollution, informal settlement, social exclusion, among others. We must find ways to grow the size and scope of business in the city. Urbanization and housing sector was allocated 105 billion shillings for the financial year, which implies that there will be less development. Taken as a whole, Kampala is one of the most rapidly growing urban regions on the continent. Recent reports indicate that Kampala's population is growing at a rate of 3.9 per annum and will see its population double by 2040.
Stakeholders, including the government, have to recognize that cities are very crucial and very important in achieving economic goals for countries and regions, and that cities are very much important in the quest for a sustainable future. And when you look at urbanization of probably cities all across the world, cities are contributing about 70% of greenhouse gas emissions, and we're talking about climate change. And so that means that cities are basically where you have to put emphasis on achieving a faster route to net zero, because cities they emit 70% of carbon emissions. At the same time, they contribute 80% of the global GDP. So attention has to put to how cities are planned, to how cities are managed, to how the private and public sectors are working together in order to achieve the net zero target in the future. How sustainable they are, and also we must look at how inclusive they are. By sustainable, we mean the issue of climate change is one of our greatest challenges as humanity right now, for the rest of the century actually. We have a target to achieve a 1.5 degrees Celsius target above pre-industrial levels. And so that means that we can't achieve it unless we actually turn cities into laboratories and key actors to conquering. So to be inclusive generally means that every person is involved and they are benefiting from the entire framework.
According to Dev Chayangayanga, Director, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, the rising inequalities, especially in the housing sector, working together is the only way to find common solutions, especially for the low-income earning society, in order to achieve government's provision of decent shelter, clean water and sanitation facilities in the cities is advised.
Use out what you call prototype plans. These are architectural plans that have been prepared by the ministry, which in most cases tends to be very expensive for those who want to build, but these are now provided for free, and they can be presented to any local government, and then they are approved and customized to the area where they are.
According to Uganda's NDP3, Uganda's current urban growth and development is unsustainable due to jobless urban growth, inadequacies in physical planning and plan implementation, leading to a sprawl of unplanned settlements. Samlanifa, Ronah, Nahabwe, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
You're still watching Business Today, and of course that story will usher us into a break. Please stick around.
Smart 24, driving business.
Lesotho, the taste of Uganda in a new international park.
He must be rich, tall, handsome, from a respectable family. He must have a maid because at our home we do not work.
Conductor Masao.
What? Obadde olobye ku ssimu?
Yamunange anti yo TV enkolera.
Nyumira omulembe omupya ogujjudde ebisanyusa omuli emikutu gya TV egisukka mu 8 n'egya radio nga kwotadde ne zifirimu ng'osinziirira wonna w'oli. Genda mu App Store oteeke app ya GOTV channels ku ssimu yo olwo onyumirwe ennaku 3 ng'olabira bwereere ewatali kozesa data. GOTV channels.
Send transport to the wrong person. Here's how to reverse it with MTN mobile money. Dial *165#. Select My Account. Select Initiate Reversal. You will see your last 3 transactions. Select the transaction you want to reverse. Enter your mobile money PIN and you'll get an SMS confirmation that the transaction has been blocked from being withdrawn. And that's it. Please note, only transactions that haven't been withdrawn can be reversed.
Smart 24, driving business.
I'm very glad that you're still tuned into Smart 24 TV and of course for this particular bulletin where we drive your business. Now moving on, with 8.3 million Ugandans impoverished and 16.9 million at the risk of poverty, the status report for the past 2 years released yesterday has opened discussion to Ugandans and the critical situation at the moment. Tonight, Fred Makubia and Siatin's Herbert Kafero understand this trend and what to look forward to.
Well, as the agenda for making Uganda a better country continues, the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development this week issued a report regarding the fight against poverty in this country. And this report emanates from 2021. It indicates a number of things, and one of those clear indicator is that those that are struggling under the poverty line occupy a percentage of 8.3. Regions with the highest level of poverty have also been indicated. Now, Siatini is one of those civil society organizations that do a number of follow-up, especially on matters that regard the economics of Uganda. This is a coffee court, and joining me to discuss this is Kafero Herbert, is the manager in charge of communication at Siatini in Uganda. Mr. Herbert, my pleasure, and thank you for finding time to speak to us.
Thank you for having me. Greetings to the viewers out there. My name is Kafero Herbert. I'm the Programs and Communications Manager at Siatini. Siatini is a short form for Southern and Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute. It's a non-government organization that works towards making trade, tax, and investment-related policies work for the people, especially the common people.
One would ask, how can a country like Uganda take time to investigate on matters of poverty? Maybe it will take time to find out issues of how economies can actually develop. So why take time to find out poverty levels in Uganda, in your opinion?
Thank you so much. Poverty reduction is part of the development agenda of government. And beyond even the national level, beyond our government looking at reducing poverty as part of its development agenda, we also signed the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And SDG 1 speaks to reducing poverty. And also, reducing poverty is also reflected in our plans. For example, the National Development Plan 3. So improving the well-being of Ugandans is a key role of government.
Okay.
Because government has a key role of ensuring that there is well-being and improved livelihoods for all the people.
So this report, I know you were part of the conference where the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development was actually issuing this report. A number of key things were highlighted. And one of it is the percentage of 8.3 people living below the poverty line. Your take on this?
Thank you so much. The report, which is dubbed the Poverty Status Report 2021, is a timely report that has been released by the Ministry of Finance in partnership with UNDP. It's a good research product because with research, then you can make informed decisions. And the report is under the theme Jobs, Informality, and Poverty in Uganda. Okay. So why this report and what's the importance of this report? Research is core to lead to successful interventions because it helps to unearth a number of issues that can be addressed. And this report presents quite a number of issues. Like you mentioned, the high levels of poverty, the increasing levels of poverty, 8.3 million Ugandans living below the poverty line.
Is this a worrying percentage?
It is a worrying percentage because here we're talking about poverty, but you cannot divorce poverty from the state of the economy. And the state of the economy is also not, it's a gloomy one, if I can say, because we are facing multiple crises. We faced COVID-19, and as the economy was gradually recovering from COVID-19, we got a setback of the Russia-Ukraine war because although it's between Russia and Ukraine, but there are implications for countries like Uganda because we are not only operating as Uganda in isolation, we're in the global economy. And in terms of trade, there are linkages. And since you asked about poverty, I'll not delve deep into Russia-Ukraine war, but just to establish the linkages that it's really something that we have to worry about because amid these multiple crises, the number of poor people is increasing. So it's a mix of challenges. From COVID-19, there was the Russia-Ukraine war, there was the Ebola outbreak, the drought and floods, so, and the debt, because there is the debt crisis. According to Bank of Uganda, the public debt stock has increased up to 80 trillion. In fact, our debt to GDP ratio is 53, is at 53%.
Okay.
That's actually worrying because it's even slightly more than half. And a number of researchers and think tanks like EPRC have warned that we are getting into a danger zone, the red line.
Especially if nothing is actually done right. There's a number of things that the report puts forth. They're talking about regions. I've had engagements with people coming from the eastern part that quite often all the reports indicate that the eastern region is not doing better. So is this report.
Thank you so much. This report highlights that there are higher levels of poverty both in the eastern region and the northern region. And a number of factors explain that. But before I actually even delve deep into speaking to poverty in the eastern and northern part of Uganda, I would also wish to point out the drivers of poverty that have been highlighted in the report. And some of the drivers include the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. Drought is also one of the drivers of poverty, but also pests and diseases.
COVID-19 came in 2019, the report.
Yes, this report was actually undertaken, the research that culminated into this report was undertaken 5 years back. So just look at 5 years back, it was actually before the COVID-19 pandemic. And even during the COVID-19 pandemic, research was ongoing to yield into this report. And just to speak to the drivers of poverty.
Drivers of poverty in the country.
These are the three, but there are many other drivers of poverty. The three highlighted, the major drivers highlighted in the report, like I earlier alluded, it's COVID-19 pandemic, there is pests and diseases that are affecting the productivity of the agriculture in the agriculture sector, and then, of course, the drought, because you too must have heard about the Karamoja situation, where a number of people were starving, and in a number of parts of Uganda, famine was a major issue and a concern to very many people.
Okay.
Yes.
So the eastern part, I think I need to be hard on this. All the reports, they keep coming up. The eastern part, you look at the HIV reports. The eastern part, you look up, now we talk about the poverty reports, still the eastern part. What explains this? I know Siatin, your operation is everywhere.
Thank you so much. According to this report, I just want to speak in relation to the report, because according to this research, there are higher levels of poverty in the eastern part of Uganda. But a number of issues have been highlighted that contribute to the higher levels of poverty. One, the leasing of land. Increasingly, for example, in Busoga region, the main economic activity, agriculture activity, is sugarcane growing. So a number of people have leased their land to get some money from those that are growing sugarcanes. Yes, so that's one area, because when you lease your land for 2 or 3 or 5 years, you deprive yourself and your family, your household of food, because when you lease your land, then you don't have enough to grow your what? Your food for consumption and also surplus for selling. But also the other issue is, when you lease your land, you lose, I mean, this is an asset. It's a factor of production. Land is a factor of production. So meaning you are disempowered. And in Busoga, in Jinja and Busoga region, broadly, if you are to visit some of the families, they grow sugarcanes up to their doorstep. You get?
So they grow the sugar.
And yet, the returns are meager. Returns from what they grow are meager. So there are a number of challenges. Even when you are to look at teenage pregnancies, they are higher in Busoga region. And this report highlights issues of multidimensional poverty. In fact, the report says that 42.1% of Ugandans are facing multidimensional poverty. This is not only income poverty, but also access poverty that is connected to access to education, access to health, access to energy, access to sanitation. So there are quite a number of issues. But just to speak to the other issue of chronic poverty. Chronic poverty has also been identified as an issue that has kept a number of people in vicious cycle of poverty, a continuous cycle of poverty that they have failed to break free, because if a family, an average household, family size in Uganda is 4 to 6 people, an average family size. That's on average. True. But some families exceed that number. And further still, this report highlights that a number of people rely on agriculture as a source of livelihood. And those that are into agriculture are facing higher levels of poverty because of the broader challenges that are facing the agriculture sector. Our agriculture sector is depending heavily on rainfall. So we know the vagaries of weather, and rain is now unpredictable. So sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't rain. And also the government hasn't invested a lot in weather forecasting so that information can trickle down to farmers to enable them to predict the seasons.
But isn't it worrying that we're talking about agriculture? One, which is a backbone of Uganda. Two, it is one of the key pillars. If you look at Vision 2040, I know Siatin critically follows up such issues. Isn't this a matter that should worry us as a country or as civil society?
Thank you so much. It is indeed worrying, but government recognizes the need to transform the economy from subsistence to commercialized, and agriculture is not left behind. But when you look at the nature of agriculture is dependent on rainfall. True. But then the other challenges surrounding agriculture is limited access to extension services by farmers, fake agriculture inputs, including seeds, and low production and productivity, limited value addition, to mention but a few. Because there is even no incentive for some of the farmers to produce because of lack of a minimum price for agricultural products. The prices fluctuate. You all know that. If you are to walk on the streets of Kampala, you might not miss seeing young people running around with 10 pineapples, selling them at 10,000. That speaks volumes, because if pineapples can be sold in Kampala at 10,000, 10 pineapples, imagine how much a farmer gets at the production center in the garden, because it means they get less than 10,000. They could even be getting 2,000. So there are a number of challenges that are curtailing farmers and producers from breaking free and getting greater gains.
Okay. And maybe those viewing us, you could find this report on the website of Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. But now, that is a report according to Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Maybe as Siatini, what is your proposal on especially how Uganda as a country can manage and handle issues of poverty in this country?
Thank you so much. As Siatini, Uganda, we believe that we need a holistic view, a holistic approach, because you cannot look at poverty in isolation, but we have to look at reviving the economy amid these multiple crises. The crises that I talked about, the debt crisis, there was the COVID-19 crisis, whose far-reaching implications, the negative effects are still felt.
How does the debt crisis connect to this report?
Of course, a higher percentage of our budget goes to debt servicing and interest repayment. So if government spends a higher proportion of the budget on servicing debt, it means less is being spent on social sectors. True. Sectors that are closer to the people. Less is being spent on productive sectors. So it means debt servicing is depriving us of the much needed resources to invest in productive sectors and also social sectors. And also the other issue is, when you look at the economy in totality, you cannot ignore the issue of policy, because these policies give us direction of where to go.
But we have good policies as a country. You have good policies.
Of course, that's what people say, but it's not entirely true, because when you look at the Investment Code Act 2019, it has a number of gaps. And Siatini has engaged government, Uganda Investment Authority, and other relevant government departments and agencies on the need to review our Investment Act. One of the issues it doesn't deliver on is performance requirements. There are several gaps in our Investment Act that need to be addressed. One of the issues is performance requirements. When investors come here, there are issues, promises that they make, because it's not only a give. If investors are given tax holidays, land concessions, there are other things that they promise to deliver on. Promises of creating employment.
I would think those would be actually the key fundamentals that would help us deal with issues of poverty.
When they create employment, it also speaks to reducing poverty, because people will have money, income, you get. And also, there is the issue of lack of joint ventures in our investment code. Then the other issue that we think that we need to address around the policy landscape is organizing our trade. But trade is guided by policies. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity. But you see, beyond signing an agreement, there is the reality on the ground that must be fixed by policies. The government, Ministry of Trade, is leading on developing the strategy. But beyond the strategy, there is the national trade policy that expired in 2018. So we are calling upon government of Uganda to invest more in the productive sectors, including trade and manufacturing, but also addressing the policy deficits. And one of the policy deficits is reviewing our investment code, also addressing, reviewing the national trade policy. But also beyond that, we need to also look at how we can use trade and tourism to reduce poverty, because it's not as we used to look at it traditionally, where we were looking at trading goods alone. But now there's trading services. Okay. And also tourism has linkages to reducing poverty, because as the tourists come in the country, the producers will be able to sell, isn't it? So there's a linkage in reducing poverty.
Okay, and maybe two things. I know you, Siatini, you are experts when it comes to issues of taxation. Two things. One, this report comes out at a time when we're in the process of budgeting. What does this mean? Secondly, there's been a review from the ministerial perspective to now, program-based budgeting. What do these the two indicate, and what do they mean actually?
Thank you so much. In this budget, it's 49.9 trillion, nearly 50 trillion.
The next budget.
Yes. There are a number of issues in the budget. Of course, it's program-based budgeting. If we are to look at agro-industrialization, it's 1.4 and a few points, 1.4 trillion.
How do these connect to the report?
They connect to the report because, you see, producers, since poverty is resident in the rural areas, the producers in the rural areas are facing a number of challenges. Low value addition, limited value addition, limited access to common user facilities. They are facing a number of challenges along the value chain. Post-harvest handling, pests and diseases. So government needs to invest in productive sectors, increase more budgetary allocation to productive sectors. Because when there is increased funding to productive sectors, it means the people will be getting out of poverty because they will get much more returns from whatever they do. But also, there are budget cuts in this budget, austerity measures of reducing. Those austerity measures have a linkage with increasing poverty, because if you cut on social sectors, for example, health, you cut on education, it means the poor will be affected more because austerity measures affect the poor more. But an opportunity here is the report, the Poverty Status Report 2021, highlights a number of actions and proposals that need to be taken on by government. And this is a timely report because we're in the budget cycle, so these should be taken on seriously by the government, but using a holistic approach.
Your parting shots as we wind up this interview.
Thank you so much. As a matter of conclusion, we call upon government to look at the economy in totality, because you cannot look at poverty in isolation of the economy. The entire economy needs to be revamped. We need to boost productivity. But also, we cannot lose sight of the continental and the global affairs. We need to increase the competitiveness of our private sector, of our MSMEs, to address the long-standing challenges of compliance to standards, competitiveness, and of course, the other issue is we need to mobilize the private sector and organize the private sector along specific products that we can ultimately sell out there.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert Kafero, for speaking to us. He's in charge of communication at Siatin. Of course, that is his perspective regarding the report on poverty that was issued by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. For sure, I know if we are to deal with poverty, it is your responsibility, it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility. And this is the Coffee Court. My name is Fred Makubuya.
Poverty, holistic approach, reality on ground, policies. Interesting terms there, of course, from that conversation between Herbert Kafero, the programs manager at Siatin, Uganda, and our very own Fred Makubuya. We are coming close to the end of business today, and I would like us to look at the recap of the headlines.
In business today, big lies and transactions revealed as Byarugaba and Finance Director. Phones are confiscated to track the money trail. Aviation spokesperson confirms limiting operational desks to curb corruption at Entebbe Airport. Poverty, vulnerability evoke reaction from stakeholders. North and Eastern Uganda inspired empathy.
That will now lead us to the end of business today. As always, thank you for the pleasure of your company and sticking with us for this particular bulletin. My name is Ronah Nahabwe with Winnie Buyinza Nakawuch in the sign language. Did I remind you that if you missed this or if you need to catch up with the rest of the stories, you can watch on our YouTube at Smart24 TV Live and follow up on our social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the like for more updates. Good evening.